Okay, hello, good morning. So I'm going to read through this. This is the next part of our inverse trig little lesson here. So you can also use the inverse function capabilities of your calculator to produce the acute angle measure when you know a trig function value like we did in problem 2. The function sine inverse, read inverse sine, I usually say sine inverse or inverse sine, is related to the sine function for acute angles in a way similar to the way the square root and other squaring operations are related. So, like, you know, what this says right here is that when you have like a square root and then you have something squared, they're like inverse relationships. They do opposite things, right? Because like the square root of 9 is equal to 3. Right? But the 3 squared is equal to 9. So they're like inverse relationships, okay? So we say the same thing for if we have our inverse trig functions and our regular functions. So sine, which is opposite over hypotenuse, is the inverse function of sine, or inverse sine. Okay, that's what it says. And we'll show you what this means in a second. So we have a couple things. So inverse sine is this way. The inverse cosine looks like cosine with a little -1 there. And inverse tangent is tangent inverse like that. So let's say we know sine A is 4/5. It says use the sine inverse function of your calculator. And we're going to go over how to do it 2 ways because I know some of you, I think, have a calculator at home and some don't. So with a graphing, with a TI graphing calculator, and then I'll also show you how to do this just using like a Google search, okay? Or Google calculator. Google calculator. So let's say we know, based off of calculator, what the triangle looks like. We know that if we were to visualize this triangle, let's say it looks like this, okay? And we're really good at identifying all the sides of our triangle because we made sure we practice and practice and practice that. We know that the opposite side is 4 and the hypotenuse side is 5. So we have 4 here and a 5 here, okay? And we want to do the inverse to get this A by itself. So what we want to do is we actually want to think that what's going on if we look at the algebra steps is if we have sine inverse or sine A equal to 4/5, okay? This is the same as if you did like the inverse sine of both sides. It like crosses that out, and the inverse sine of 4/5. So we would have A, your angle, your answer, your angle, A is equal to the sine inverse of 4/5, okay? So let's talk about it. So if you're using your graphing calculator, if you have one, if you don't, just skip over this part till we get to the other part. You want to make sure that your mode, you're in degree mode. That's like step number 1. So let's just take a picture of that. So you want to make sure you're in degree mode. And we'll send this to a current page. So we make sure we're in degree mode. That's our first step. And then we just use this row right here where it says sine inverse, cosine inverse, tangent. But see how it's in blue? That means we need to hit our second button first, because that's our blue button. And then we need to, from that, we need to use one of our trig functions. So for this one, we happen to use sine, but inverse sine, but for the other ones, we might be using cosine inverse or tangent inverse, okay? So that's that. Let me extend my page a little bit, okay? So that's what we would use. So let's just go back to our calculator. And remember, what we're doing is we're doing this function right here, sine inverse of 4/5. So our steps on our calculator, we just go to our home screen, and we're in degree mode. We would just hit second sine inverse 4 divide 5. It's so much easier than what we just did because you're not really solving an equation, you're just plugging something in. And you get your answer. So the answer here would be 53 degrees, okay? Now if you don't have a graphing calculator at home, that's all right. You can do this without a graphing calculator, but you're just going to have to use Google. So if we go to Google, this is a problem we're going to practice in a second. And we just go to Google, we're going to say equals. Now, the big thing here that we have to remember, and you're probably going to have to pause this video and write it down, the Google calculator doesn't do inverse sine. It knows inverse sine as another way. It knows it as what's called arc sine, okay? And cosine, it knows as arc cosine, and tangent, it knows as arctangent. So if you're using the Google calculator, you're not going to be able to type in sine inverse, okay, like that. You're going to have to type it in using these abbreviations. So you might want to write this down, okay? If you go on to take calculus, a lot of times you see sine inverse written as arcsine. They mean the same thing, okay? It's just another way to write it. I have a dot on my screen. It's making me think there's something on here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we go back to our Google calculator and we're going to type in equals arcsine of 4/5. Oh, arcsine 4/5, like that, okay? And we get this as our answer. So let me just take a little screenshot of this. Arcsine of 4/5. That's what we type in. Now we'll recognize that our answer is not the same as what we just got. And the reason for that is that your Google calculator is going to give you your answer in radian form, okay? And we don't really want that in radian form. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to see where you have this in radian form. What I did is I just copy it and I put, you know, equals, you know what? Does that work in degrees? Maybe we could do it this way. Oh, look at that. That's even better. Okay, forget what I just said. So if you just say you know you want your answer in degrees, so you have to just type in arcsine 4 divided by 5 and just say in degrees and you get your answer. That's so much cooler than what we just had. That was not cool. All right, and that's how you would solve this little baby equation, right? And you're solving for the missing, whenever you're using inverse sine, inverse cosine, or inverse tangent, you're solving for a missing side. Or excuse me, you're solving for a missing angle, okay? So when I use sine inverse or cosine inverse, sine inverse, cosine inverse, tangent inverse, I know, arc sine, arc cosine, arc tang, I, okay, am finding a missing angle. That's the big thing. And what we just did, what we were doing all last week, or week 2 of this, was we were finding missing sides. But here we're finding missing angles. I actually think this is so much easier because you don't have to solve an equation. You kind of just figure out like what's the, you know, with the SOHCAHTOA, opposite of hypotenuse, adjacent hypotenuse, and you just solve it out, okay? So that's 2 ways using their calculator or this to solve an equation. Let's look at some little equations right here. So that wasn't the one I wanted. We're doing this next. Okay, so how could we use our calculator to solve each of these? Now, yeah, like no duh, all you're going to do, all right, is either you're going to type in, now I need to do this, negative, how am I going to make this happen? So you would do tangent inverse, okay, 1.84, right? And you would get your answer, all right? And if you didn't have a calculator, you could just do arctangent of 1.84 in degrees, and you would get you would get your answer. All right, so that's what you would type in. And the only thing that's going to change here when you do this is that you know, this format is the same for all these. You're just going to be either, you got to pay attention, or you're given signs. So here you have sine, so this is going to be a sine instead of a tangent, a sine instead of a tangent. And then what do you get? 0.852. So 0.852, and just replace that in there. 0.852, and you just type that in. Okay, here we have sine again. So we do sine, arcsine, and we would just do 2.15, right? Arcsine 2.15. I can tell you right now we're going to get a big nope problem with this when we go to do it. Okay, cosine inverse. Okay, 0.213. 0.213, the 0 in the front doesn't matter, and this is arc cosine, okay? And you're just going to type each of those things in, all right? So let's take a moment, and let's just use your calculator, use your Google, and pause the video, and I want you to evaluate each of those. Just practice, you know, with the number operations, remembering doing your second key, and then second key, and then this row, or okay, or doing, or just typing it in just like you see it here. All right, so I took a few moments and I evaluated the first 2, and that was like no No drama mama, right? We got right to the right answer. So we got 61.48 degrees here. Let's round that baby up. Okay, and then for this one we got 58.43 degrees. Oh man, what am I doing? 58.43, 8.43 degrees here. Okay, and now notice when I try to do this one, I told you we were going to have a little bit of an issue. Sine 2.13, when I go to do that and I hit enter, it looks all gravy baby, but when I hit enter, oh, I get an error. And when I say 2, let's see what's my error, go to the error, it's right there. Okay, it can't evaluate this. Okay, so since it can't evaluate this, since this gives us an error, so we get an error. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. Let's just do this. Error. E-R-R-O-R. Boom. Error. We get an error, and that's because you cannot find, that's too large of a ratio for sine. Okay? So this is actually no answer or undefined. Undefined or no answer. Okay? Our last one, cosine of 0.213. This is going to go smooth, I can tell you right now. Second cosine inverse. Oh, let's get that out of there. Second cosine inverse of 0.213. Okay? And we're going to get a smooth answer. So we get this as 77.70, or just 0.7 degrees. Okay? So that's how you would solve using sine inverse, cosine inverse, or tangent inverse. All right, the next problems we're going to be working on is actually setting up this ratio to solve the problem. Let's go.